Now, looking at the Philippines, what's your take on the market and why are you so excited to invest?
My take is that we have all the pieces of the puzzle in place for the startup and entrepreneurship ecosystem to really serve that mission of creating that multiplier effect and helping the country make progress in our national development. The quality and depth of the founder pool is the highest that it's ever been in the Philippines. We've been a very hot market in the context of relative to the other markets of Southeast Asia. That's the reason why this is the long game, right? We're 4 or 5 years into what will be really the golden age of Philippine startups. Great to be with you, Simon.
Thank you so much for doing this, Paulo.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'm always really interested in your stories because we've known each other for quite a while now.
That's right.
A
Since
few
you
years.
landed on our shores 4 years ago now,
Yeah, 4
Simon.
years.
So it's been a while. It's been a few years of collaboration.
Time flies. And really, every time you speak, I really enjoy kind of all the things that you've done in your life.
Thank you.
And all the wisdom that you give, and you gave us a lot of advice when we started. So I hope that we can extend some of the advice to our listeners. But maybe for everyone who does not know you yet, I can quickly give you quite like a rundown of what you've done so far. So you've studied at Princeton for undergrad.
That's right.
Went to Harvard for MBA. Then ended up co-founding Zalora Philippines.
Yeah.
You ran it for over a decade
Mhm.
as CEO. After that, you founded Kaya Founders, running it as managing partner right now. You've served on many different boards,
That's right.
including Shakey's. You talked about this before this podcast. And you're also involved in a nonprofit organization called Hope.
That's right.
Amazing. Like really, that resume reads like a novel. It's amazing. But I actually want to start with something different. I want to start with your grandfather.
Sure.
You're Paulo Campos III.
That's right.
He's Dr. Paulo Campos I.
He is.
And he was really kind of a national scientist.
That's right. That's right.
He kind of pioneered nuclear medicine.
That's
Actually,
right.
really never really heard about the term nuclear medicine
Yeah.
before. But he was even nominated for a Nobel Prize.
He was.
And I want to kind of know how he impacted your life.
Right.
I thought you were pretty close.
No, 100%. So I think he's certainly my inspiration when it comes to kind of the career I've chosen to have. My grandfather, as you mentioned, was a medical doctor by training. He lived through the war years. So he and my grandmother, and they met at UP Medical School during the wartime years. Really, kind of finished, graduated post-World War II. So they had a mass graduation for all of the medical students who were meant to graduate during the kind of World War II period. And then he started his career as a physician, right? At the time, Philippines, post-World War II, thriving country. He had the benefit, and one of his patients was Secretary General Carlos P. Romulo, who at the time was the first Secretary General of the United Nations. He had a heart condition, so my grandfather, as a cardiologist, was brought on many of these UN trade missions with Secretary General Romulo, and my grandfather and grandmother at a very young age got to travel the world as part of the newly formed United Nations. So he really had this expansive experience that opened his mind to the world at very young in his years, and so that kicked off like an extremely amazing and decorated life, helping the country through medicine and education. He was a researcher, as you mentioned, so he indeed, his research for endemic goiter was what kind of nominated for Nobel Prize consideration, and he started many of the key medical kind of institutions, even in the education space. For example, at the University of the Philippines, they have this community health program or rural community program where they go into rural areas as up-and-coming doctors to support the local communities. That's a big part of the UP medical education now, and my grandfather pioneered and started that during his time. He, however, didn't stay in the field of business, and that's perhaps where I most like him, that he became a very successful businessman and entrepreneur, still in healthcare and education, so still in the service of the country, focused on service industries. But he founded in 1969 a hospital called Medical Center Manila, now called Manila Med. Med, which is still one of the largest private hospitals in Manila, and today partnered with Mount Grace Hospital Group, where there are partners in that hospital today, and Emilio Aguinaldo College, which is today has 20,000 students, known for the medical services fields across 2 campuses in Manila and Cavite. So he started that in 1973. So my grandfather was a doctor, scientist by trade, but really a visionary and businessman in practice. And the institutions that he's built really have lived on long after he's left this world, right? So he's certainly someone I look up to, and very proud to share his name, right?
It's amazing. I really love it.
Yeah.
Like, did you feel kind of pressure or more inspiration, like growing up and that kind of accomplishments around you?
Definitely. And I mean, the other things, I'm an only child, so somehow I think only children. I'm the eldest of my 8 of my cousins on my grandfather's side. So I did, but I think I wanted to serve a common mission as my grandfather did, while at the same time charting my own course. I knew I didn't have it in me to be a doctor at a young age. I'm generally very squeamish when it comes to blood. So for no other reason than that, I think decided being a doctor was probably not the right course for me. But I certainly shared the mission of, caring about the Philippines and the economic development of the country, creating jobs for the country. My grandfather, in his later years, he had one lesson that he wanted to impart to me, and he'd always tell me this very directly: is if you want to help your country, create jobs, right? Very simply, I think that's something that stuck with me.
Very noble.
And even through my course of studies at Princeton, at HBS, all of the papers that I would write, and even my senior thesis at Princeton was about microfinance in the Philippines. I really turned my eye back to the Philippines, trying to answer the question of how to best help the country in a way that that allows the country to prosper and succeed.
Yeah,
right?
you certainly did.
Yeah, then that's what I do share in common with him, is that trying to help the country however I can.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about Princeton.
Yeah.
You didn't study business.
I
was
didn't.
surprised. You
Yeah.
studied international affairs.
I did.
Something like that, right?
Princeton has a very noteworthy school, previously called the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs. They now call it the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. Indeed, I was very interested in geopolitics, political economy, international relations. I've always felt that the Philippines' strength is that we're a very plural society. It's like you've been here 4 years, Simon, right? Like very nice to live in the Philippines. Filipinos, our strength is that we're the friendliest and most hospitable people in the world. So I really thought that finding our place in kind of the global landscape was somehow the path I wanted to take. I even took the Department of Foreign Affairs entrance exam coming out of college, thinking that I might want to join the DFA and go down that path. My conclusion, and partly because of some of my research at Princeton, including my microfinance research, is that perhaps the best way to help the country would be in the private sector, and that if you look up across long decades of history, it's really the economy and the private sector's ability to create an engine for growth that, as I put very simply, allows us to make the pie bigger for everyone, right? Like if we can make the pie bigger as business people, then we can really help the country and create this multiplier effect that creates jobs, that allows the economy to move forward. So post Princeton, I said I'll abandon my dreams to become a ambassador or diplomat, and I still might in my later years, who knows. But really set my eye towards the private sector and doing what I can to help the private sector in the Philippines.
Yeah, I think the private sector can probably create the most sustainable impact.
Right.
Like you did it. We're gonna talk about it in a second with like the companies that you've built and the companies you're involved in today. But before that, I think another very notable figure in your life was probably Jim Ayala.
Yeah, that's right.
After Princeton, I think you went to Ayala Land.
That's right.
And
I worked for him.
Assisted the CEO back then. How
That's
was
right.
that?
It was an amazing experience. Jim is my first mentor. He's Ninong or godfather in my wedding. I always like to say that the world is round. I'm very proud to have also then been able to work with Jim's son, Gabby Ayala, who currently is heading up Kashalo in the Philippines, but before that was with Kaya as an entrepreneur in residence as he made his way back to the Philippines. So we kind of also came full circle in our relationship, our families together. But he's someone I certainly look up to. He's similar background, also Princeton HBS. He also opened my mind to the world of consulting. I spent some time at Boston Consulting Group post HBS pre-Zalora, and Jim himself was with McKinsey for 2 decades and the only Filipino ever to reach the global partnership of McKinsey. So someone I really learned a lot from, most important thing perhaps is Jim, and anyone who knows him will know how mission-driven he is and how, while he's a supreme intellect and great business person, he really has at his core a set of values around helping the country, and which we're very aligned with the Ayala Group. I mean, what I loved about my experience there was that we all really have this esprit de corps around nation building and helping the country, and that comes from directly from the top of Ayala Group, and being able to have that experience and then be in the room when some of these very exciting decisions and meetings that Jim would have for, at the time, it was the 5th largest company in the Philippines, was really a great experience for me, right? And a lot of my leadership lessons and running businesses and even now advising founders, harken back to what I saw in those very early years of mine, right?
That's amazing. Like after Ayala, you went back to university.
I did. I went to
MBA at Harvard.
That's right.
Yeah, pretty great. And looking at your classmates,
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Like a whole bunch of successful entrepreneurs
That's
in
right.
Southeast Asia.
That's right.
Anthony Tan, right? Co-founder
right,
of
that's
Grab,
right. Yeah.
co-founder of Gojek,
That's
all
right.
part of your classmates.
Yeah.
How was it back then?
I'll also
Like,
mention Jesse Maxwell, who was, of
Right.
course, one of the GPs of Foxmont. They were all a year below me, actually, but the way, I guess, a lot of us from Southeast Asia would end up hanging out, even if there are 900 people in each batch at HBS. Like, of course, you naturally gravitate to kind of your peers from your region. So we had an amazing time there. I mean, you mentioned all of those, people, and what impressed me most is that they were all thinking about their ideas even while we were in business school. So as someone who was coming from a very traditional corporate experience, in the Philippines, in the conglomerate setting, my mind was really open to the world of tech and startups, and the power of startups to create fundamental change in a particular country and economy, right? It's no secret that the way VC investing is done globally for firms such as ours, yourself included, is really patterned after the Silicon Valley model of venture capital investing, right? So to be able to be in the US and absorb through osmosis all of that positive optimism about creating the future and building the future, as we say at Kaya, that we want to see through the form of startups, that was like the biggest takeaway for me. So I knew that when I did come home to the Philippines, that I would want to perhaps take that path for myself. And I think that was my biggest takeaway from the 2 years that I spent at Boston.
I read it and I was very amazed because like all these success stories all in one place. I can't just imagine how the conversations were back then. But slowly, after like a very great career in corporate, Boston Consulting Group, Ayala Land, really top organizations, you made the jump to the crazy world of startups.
That's
2021, 2011.
2011, exactly. December 2011. That's right.
You started Zalora in the Philippines.
That's right.
Like, what did you see back then? Because I think 2011 there was not much e-commerce back then.
That's right. I mean, to paint the picture, hard to understand now because of how prevalent e-commerce is these days.
Right.
But back then, honestly, I had a lot of my friends really pull me aside and say, "Hey, are you sure that you want to do e-commerce in the Philippines?" Like, at the time there were maybe a few million Filipinos online. With access to the internet. Even then, it was only starting mass adoption was only starting to creep up. There were no e-commerce sites really. I mean, there were some group buying sites, I guess, that might have been born around that time. You had a site called Multiply previously, which was like a social media site which people would then hack to use to transact C2C. But the idea was that as if you looked around to other places around the world, and that's where I think my experiences in the US and Singapore and other places really helped to give me that global vision, a bit like my grandfather's tour around the world with Secretary General Romulo. I could see that e-commerce was a coming wave, and that country by country there would likely be e-commerce companies coming up in the space, right? I also had the benefit of being able to have co-founders who I really loved working with and believing and believed in, namely my co-founder of Zalora Philippines at the time was Brian Koo, who's another
great entrepreneur,
giant in the local startup
yeah.
ecosystem. Someone I learned a lot from at my time at BCG. So he and I left BCG together to be the two co-founders of Zalora here. Okay. We also had the advantage of having the backing of Rocket Internet, which, as you know from your German roots, was really a key instrumental player in how the Southeast Asia landscape has evolved over the last decade. What they brought was really a business building mentality and capital raising capability that really allowed each country in Southeast Asia, and they played a really catalytic role in launching all of these businesses between Zalora and Lazada, Foodpanda, others in the region. Because Zalora predated those other companies that eventually became part of the Rocket sphere of influence. I'm actually an original incorporator of Lazada Philippines and Foodpanda Philippines and all of these Rocket companies that came after us. But indeed, like part of what we strive to do at Kaya is very much take the positive lessons from that experience around how playbook, great founders armed with a playbook and capital and a clear mission can really create lasting change, right? There are also a bunch of things that they likely would have done differently. So that benefit of 2020 hindsight, then we've now in my current role tried at Kaya Founders trying to get that balance right between an impactful investor that creates amazing companies in the Philippines and providing founders the support they needed, right? So.
Yeah, before we dive deeper into Kaya Founders, take me back to the early days of Zalora.
Sure, yeah.
There was no logistics, supply chain, right?
Of that,
3PL was probably not a thing. People didn't have online credit cards.
That's right.
How did you acquire users? What did you do in the very early days of Zalora?
It's a great question. And one of the geeky things I'm very proud of is there's actually a Harvard Business School case written about Zalora Philippines that they used to teach at HBS for all the first year students. And it was set in 2016, which would have been year 4 of the journey. And if you read the case, you'll see how kind of how much of a startup it was. Let's say, I think the takeaway from that experience to exactly how you framed the question was that there were really so many parts of the ecosystem that we take for granted now that we're missing. Right? So at the time, the big 3PLs would not offer cash on delivery for us. We knew precisely the two things you mentioned, that credit card penetration was 4% or something extremely low. Unlike in the US and other places where electronic forms of payment were already widely adopted, not so here. So we surmised that offering cash on delivery would be an interesting nuance to how we launch in the Philippines. Turned out to be right. To this day, a majority of Zalora and the other platforms orders are all done on a cash on delivery basis. So that allowed us to really open the market to a wider audience. I think it solved the pain point that was inhibiting e-commerce from emerging then, which is the link between logistics and payment in addition to the inventory and the stock and all of that. we would have built a very different business if we were to have done it today. Today, there's so many service providers across all the whole e-commerce value chain that you'd be able to be very asset light about it. But at the time, there was none of that, right? So in a way, we really had to build out each part of the value chain end to end.
So you build your own logistics.
Own logistics, own warehouse.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's a you would have an impression that an online business is just a website that
right.
like those boxes you see on a screen, when in reality 90% of the business, as we say, is really all the heavy lifting that has to be done in the warehouse, coordinating the riders and the deliveries, receiving stock from suppliers, and stocking it in a way that can be picked and your order fulfilled in the way that, of course, it's done today. All of that had to be built from scratch, right? So I think as a founder, you're the chief everything officer in the beginning, right? Like, and there's no if I reflect on that decade-long journey for me, each phase was really a different type of challenge, right? And the founder journey really changes as you scale the business. In the beginning, it's just all hands on deck, figuring out how to get from 0 to 1, as we say.
And I think you also had to kind of fight a cultural shift. Right. Filipinos love going to the malls.
That's right.
Going shopping physically in stores, also clothes.
Yeah.
I think buying online is totally different from buying books. That's why Jeff Bezos started with books, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Like, what did you do? I know some examples, but maybe you can share.
No, I'd love to share. So first of all, we made a conscious decision to focus on the fashion segment. What we always said is that we were always not looking to build the biggest e-commerce company. We were looking to build the most profitable one. And if you were to look at the different categories that in other places in the world people would shop online, typically stuff by kind of electronics or books, as you said, in Amazon's case. But I think fashion being one of them. Indeed, the mall-going behavior of the Philippines was something that was a reality. So we... in thinking about customer activation and how to introduce people to the world of online shopping, we really tried to reach customers in situ, right, in the mall and in those locations. We partnered with the likes of Ayala Malls to launch a series of pop-up shops. They were conceptualized as digital showrooms, so you couldn't actually walk out of the pop-up store or showroom with items, but you could scan the hang tag and fit it in the fitting room, but when you scan the barcode, it would go to your Zalora app, and you could then add it and have it delivered. You could actually have it delivered to the store. You'd have to wait to the following day to pick it up, but being able to bridge the online and offline experience was one key marketing strategy that we had. And to this day, we see many of the very successful startups still having this, as we call it these days, O2O, or online to offline, or omni-channel type approach. So and definitely figuring all of that out, while at the same time trying to get the deliveries orders on time, and receiving all the customer service calls and inquiries, and talking to brands to get them to join the platform. I mean, certainly it was the most productive I've been in my career.
I can imagine. Maybe also the most stressed.
Yeah, no, somehow.
And eventually, Ayala also invested or bought a stake of Zalora, right?
So we formed a partnership with them in 2017, and that really, again, really something else very helpful to the future of Zalora. Zalora today is much larger than it was then. My last year as CEO, we were fully profitable as a business, and certainly without the support of Ayala throughout the journey, that wouldn't have been possible. So.
Yeah, and you talked about launching the most profitable e-commerce business. And eventually, I think 2019, Global Fashion Group went public in Frankfurt.
That's right.
My home turf.
That's right.
And I read that Philippines was always the most profitable business unit.
That's
right.
You
were kind of highlighted of the kind of bright spot in the IPO report.
And even, of course, I mean, all of that is true, but I think what I was most proud of during my decade as Zalora CEO, and indeed one of the great milestones in the journey was I was able to represent all of Zalora. At the time we had 3,000 employees, not in the Philippines only, but across the region during the IPO ceremony in Frankfurt. That was still pre-pandemic, so it was July 2019. It really, and then that by then it was year 8 of the journey. So, it was really, something I'd always be very proud of. I think more than the stats on how the business was performing, or the outsized share of Zalora Philippines across the group, I think it was really about the team and culture that I was very proud to have built. Many of the leaders still running the business today are people I really look up to, and were amazing colleagues throughout the years. And that's the biggest lesson for what we do today. A startup is nothing but a collection of talent, right? And the job of a founder and CEO is to harness the people that are following you towards a common vision and mission, to create a sustainable and profitable business, right? So I think that's what I learned most, is how to build a high-performing team. I'm very proud of everything we've accomplished. We also had a lot of fun while doing it, and
Nice.
I have countless unforgettable memories of my times with my colleagues, and while many of them have moved on and themselves doing amazing things, including some of them as the Zalora Mafia, so to speak, in the Kaya portfolio. It's the thing you can be most proud of as a leader, right? Is that the people who you've worked with and stood side by side with in the trenches, that they grow, and that they use like time with you and your company as a way to really achieve their dreams, right? And so I tried to take some of that, sprinkle some of that, learn those learnings and that enthusiasm to all the founders we work with today.
Like, what's the biggest lesson in terms of building culture? Like,
Right.
you did it for a lot of people.
Right.
Like, what was key in building culture at
I
Zalora?
think most importantly, and perhaps for the founders out there, is you need to walk the walk, right? I mean, especially in this day and age, people know when you're not being authentic, right? You need to really be, you need to authentically care about the mission of the company. It can't just be a set of tasks that you put yourself through every day. It has to be a vision and mission that can broaden and inspire people to work through the ups and downs that will inevitably come in the journey. So I think the most important is to walk the walk as the leader and really live that culture. It's not what's written on the wall. I mean, value statement or whatever. It's what the team and your colleagues see and how you live and the
Actually
behavior
do on a
that you do
daily
and what
basis.
you do on a daily basis, right? And at the end of the day, that's all we have as business people, right? We have ourselves, our kind of CV, so to speak, or your set of experiences, and the impact you've been able to have on the people that work around you, right? Business is a team sport. This is something where inevitably, even in the age of AI, where you can be very productive as a, out of the, you'll still need people along the journey to support you, follow you. So that's the biggest lesson, is that you need to walk the walk to bring others along.
Yeah, that's very true. You just need to show it.
That's right.
You need
That's
to
right.
live it. Yeah.
That's right.
But after the IPO, you eventually left Zalora and
That's right,
started
yeah.
your current business, Kaya Founders, venture capital fund focused mostly in the Philippines,
That's right.
investing early stage, even day zero, and playing quite a hands-on role with the founders.
That's right.
Does it often feel a bit that you want to jump in if something is not going right? You've had such a long track record as CEO. You sometimes want to jump in?
No, thankfully not. Precisely because that would be the antithetical to how we think about how early stage startups succeed. What we say is we're Kaya founders. We don't call ourselves Kaya Capital or Kaya Ventures or Kaya anything like that, because at the early stage of investing, as we do, honestly, it's really all about the founder. Ideas will be changed and morphed and take a life of their own over time. Pivots, big and small, will happen naturally, no matter what the company. But at the end of the day, what you're underwriting with your investment in the early stage is that the founder is going to be effective at building that business that you guys are dreaming of together, right? With that mission and objective, my role then is to be on call, right? I need and to guide and provide advice at the right time, to provide introductions, network. Capital is the least of what we do, honestly.
Yeah.
And you mentioned hands-on. That's something we take great pride in. This is not a job for me. This is my calling, right? I would do it for free, and indeed so I mean, this is something that I love doing every day, is meeting founders. Of course, there's experiences I can share, and somehow there's practical advice I can give about building digital businesses at scale in the Philippines. And my partners, the likes of Ray Alimurong, who was heading up Lazada previously, Liza Gokongwei, who was previously the CEO and now chairwoman of Summit Media, and of course Gokongwei Group. I mean, our collective sets of experiences kind of can help founders avoid some of the mistakes we might have made in our careers. But ultimately, it's your role as advisor, mentor, supporter, cheerleader, friend, which sometimes has to be difficult conversations, right? I mean, it's not always up and to the right. There's ups and downs in any
Certainly
journey.
not in a startup.
That's right. So that's the way I see my role. I refer to it as parallel entrepreneurship because I get to work on a lot of different things at the same time. But I'm very happy to be more in the coaching, advising capacity than on the field.
Fair point. It's also the right approach
Right.
from an investor point of view, to be honest. Now, looking at the Philippines, I've observed the market for quite some time now, and I've heard many times it's the golden window for startup. It's the inflection point. I've heard that also many times. What's your take on the market, and why are you so excited to invest?
No, my take is that we have all the pieces of the puzzle in place for the startup and entrepreneurship ecosystem to really serve that mission of creating that multiplier effect and helping the country make progress in our national development. It used to be the case pre-pandemic that many of those key pieces of the puzzle were missing, starting with the funding landscape. It used to be that if you have an idea, that there were steps in the kind of funding journey where there were not the kind of institutional investors such as ourselves playing those roles. It unfortunately made it the case that entrepreneurship often was the domain of those with a safety net, right? That you'd have to have kind of a safety net in order to become an entrepreneur, to be able to take that risk. We see what we do as having a very democratizing impact to level the playing field, to allow someone with a great idea, great domain expertise, great motivation to be able to take the plunge to create that vision into a reality, right? And having the funding and support at those earliest stages of the journey so that they can make the leap to become founders, right? So to answer your question directly, why I'm most excited is that the quality and depth of the founder pool is at the highest that it's ever been in the Philippines. In large part, that's because we've been a very hot market in the context of relative to the other markets of Southeast Asia. The first decade, and very much during the time I was building Zalora, I think Singapore, Indonesia really got a lot of the lion's share of the attention, venture capital funding. And in this post-pandemic period, it's really more countries like the Philippines, Vietnam to some extent as well, getting the attention as the most interesting markets, not only from a venture capital deployment point of view, but from also our demographics, youngest country in Southeast Asia, even with the ups and downs of our national story each year. We've been steadily growing over the course of 3 decades now. The interest in the Philippines is high, right? And I'll point to you being here for the past 4 years as a proof point there that you could be anywhere in the world, but you choose to make your life here, and that contributes and helps us as a country, and you're helping the Philippines in planting your flag here. So that's the reason why this is the long game, right? We're 4 or 5 years into what will be really the golden age of Philippine startups, and over the next 10 to 15 years. We have all, and this is, if I take a step back and relate it to kind of my personal mission as to what is the highest leverage way to help the country, I really think that being able to address the fact that the Philippines is the highest Gini coefficient in Southeast Asia, so we're the most unequal society in the region, unfortunately, right? The way to level the playing field is to support founders and entrepreneurs who are creating startups that can challenge the large incumbent companies, right? So that's a mission I can see myself doing for decades, and so far so good. The first 5 years.
Any specific industries you're most excited about? I read about the fintech report Kaya recently launched.
That's right. We set out in the beginning of our Kaya journey to be sector agnostic, as I was saying, because we really think the founder is what really we're betting on and underwriting in any investment. We purposely made it a point to say, look, we'll invest in ventures related to the Philippines, solving Philippine problems, but we're open to all industries and sectors. So we purposely had a sector agnostic investment view. Fast forward to today, and we've invested in close to 50 companies, right? So obviously you can look backwards and reflect on what we did end up investing in and draw some themes and parallels just ex post, right? And what we see is that we talk about these 3 themes that we've seen emerge over the course of our investing. The first around the new Filipino consumer. This is very much, my what I know. This is, with us reaching that $4,000 GDP per capita threshold. Often that's when you see an inflection point when it comes to, consumption, online shopping, even additional disposable income to take care of yourself better, healthcare wise. So this new Filipino consumer, and the fact that we're highly digitized, social media savvy, globally connected, that, and the youngest population in Southeast Asia. If you look at where is interesting to invest in consumer globally, Philippines will be top of the list, right? Second is around frictionless business. People think that coming out of the pandemic, the biggest takeaway is that we've all learned how to shop online in Zalora and other places, or order food online. All of that true, but I actually see the more fundamental behavioral change that I've seen looking back at the pandemic period is that for the first time, business leaders in the Philippines, from the sari-sari store owner, trying to build their small business, to the largest enterprises and like publicly listed Philippine companies, all of them now are looking for ways that technology can help improve their business, right? Monetization and B2B SaaS, difficult if non-existent pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, I think you really see a rush of these amazing industry-specific B2B companies helping companies of all shapes and sizes, of all industries and sectors, to improve how they do things. And the power of technology in so doing, I think, is an extremely powerful one. I would also add that with the focus on AI, of course, being top of mind for all of us these days, in our view, this is the sector where that will have the most practical application in the Philippine setting, in that applied AI in the kind of business B2B setting. There are a number of companies we're very excited about there. And then finally, if I can talk about the third thesis, is one that I think is peculiar to the Philippines in some sense, and but one that is really fills a need and a gap from a development economics point of view, is addressing the credit gap in the Philippines, right? Both for businesses and consumers. That's various estimates, but it's undoubtedly a huge gap, and the reason why, and one of the key drivers that will create this multiplier effect. So to be able to invest in businesses that are able to provide credit to, again, businesses or consumers, leveraging the technology to make better underwriting decisions, right? And where the proprietary data you get from the tools that you and software and other ways to get proprietary information about a business or an industry allows you then to be smarter about underwriting good credit decisions, right? A perfect example of if we crack this gap in the economy, there really will be this multiplier effect. This entrepreneurs and consumers use credit to uplift their businesses and lives.
The economy will overall
100%.
benefit, right?
That's right. So those are the kind of the three themes we see. I think there's a fourth emerging, and that's really around supporting the national development of the country at the grassroots. We've invested in businesses not only in Manila but across the Philippines, and really finding ways for technology to solve problems that at the bottom of the pyramid, so to speak, those who need the technology to support their uplifting their lives most. I think that's an area we're very excited about in the future, and we'll be making a few investments in that sphere soon, and very much aligned with the national development goal of what we do.
Yeah, so even outside Metro Manila.
Very much so. And amazing founders and entrepreneurs all over the Philippines, and the depth of the talent pool in ex-Metro Manila, key cities around the world, around the country, has never been as high and as it is today.
You shared that you're supporting founders basically from day one.
Yep.
So the key thing to underwrite and then a startup is the founder,
right,
and the founding team.
That's right.
So you must know. So what's kind of the thing you're looking out for if you're looking at founders? What are the key traits, aspects at founding teams that you're most excited about?
So there's a structured way we assess when we meet a founder. If they have the different aspects we think it takes to succeed. Maybe I'll mention a few of them. I think the first is really a personal connection to the problem. Every startup journey will be challenging, right? I haven't seen a startup where it's easy to build. Again, there will be so many challenges, ups and downs. It's so precarious and daunting, the journey. It's the ultimate challenge in business, if you ask me, right? Starting a company and starting a business, right? So you will inevitably lose hope in the dark times unless you really care about what you're building a solution for, right? If this is some passing intellectual fancy that like you see it intellectually but you don't really care about that solution you're building or the customers you're building it for, you're going to give up at the first sign of a challenge, right? So having that personal connection and motivation to the problem, I think, is one of the core things. Definitely a track record of being a builder. And being an entrepreneur is really about doing what it takes, chief everything officer, putting one foot after the next. You don't have to have pedigree, you don't have to come from a certain background. You just need to know what to do to get from one step to the next in building whatever solution or business you're trying to do, right? That's the key thing. And in that, if I were to reflect on my personal point of view, and there's a number of criteria we look at Kaya overall, but the one that I agree is, for me, the number one is the coachability point, right? Where, and that's not to say that we as investors are more educated or more or know what to do, right? Or again, our role is to give you advice, and it's your job as the founder to take that advice and to do with it as you see fit. Some founders have the pitfall of being a bit stubborn, right? Or maybe intellectually arrogant, not wanting to challenge their own thinking when given great ideas to consider and great avenues to look at. So what I always say is that we as investors invest in lines, not dots, and being able to see the growth of a person or their idea or how they're thinking about something, or the growth of the business, of course, traction-wise, from one touch point to the next. That ultimately is the mark about who will succeed or not. Nothing to do with your background or where you're from or any of that. Right?
Like how fast you iterate, how fast
speed of iteration, the ability to take in feedback, be adaptable enough and flexible enough to, and humble enough to accept that feedback, know what to do to iterate and fix the business and take the next step forward, doing that at speed and being able to, again, one foot after the next. That is the builder skill, right?
Right. Yeah, so being a founder is all-consuming.
It
as
is.
you said.
It
It's
is.
the hardest challenge in business.
It is.
But looking at your life as holistically as possible, you're a father of 3 children.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Would you want them to be founders one day?
I would, 100%. I mean, again, and maybe taking a step back and like the philosophy of why I think this is important of like what we do in the context of a broader economy or society, right? I always reference the economist Joseph Schumpeter, who talks about how the business cycle is one of creative destruction, right? Just do the exercise of looking at the most valuable companies in the world or in the Philippines or, and over the last, today versus 10 years ago versus 20 years ago versus 30 years ago, you're going to see that those companies change, right? Like, in fact, there's a lot of these tech companies we talk about now, these Magnificent Seven or whatever, these tech companies, were not around 10 years ago, right? Many of them were born just in the intervening 10-year period. Many of the biggest companies previously in other, more traditional industries are no longer the biggest companies today, right? So that whole cycle of business, that this idea that there's creative destruction going on, that industries rise and fall, generations of entrepreneurs succeed, build very big businesses. Here you look at all of the successful conglomerates and the way they've really pulled the country up in the businesses that they've built. That's the scaling part. At some point, there's a point where new challengers and new founders and entrepreneurs play a role in injecting new ideas, new energy to an economy, right? And this business cycle, this goes on and on, right? So in my mind, there will always be a role for founders and entrepreneurs in a role to bring society and the economy forward. What we need to do as an ecosystem is to make sure that the nest or the pieces of the puzzle are in place for someone wanting to do that to be able to have a fair shot at making it. Right. And to ensure that we're also an ecosystem that doesn't that also is proud about failure, right? Often failing at a startup is the best origin story to start another one, right? And
good lessons.
Exactly. Not only in the
failure.
Philippines, but across the world, and many famous examples of the best businesses coming out of being born of the ashes of something that didn't work the first time, right? So creating that culture of entrepreneurship and is something I'd love to my kids to get into. But I'm also not going to pressure them.
Very good. Nice. I think there's so much wisdom. Any last words for our listeners? Any piece of advice? I'm sure there are many founders listening.
No, first of all, I would encourage everyone to keep dreaming, keep building, don't give up. These days, a lot of, some gloom and doom around the region, globally. Of course, a lot of positive messages around AI and all of that as well, but I've heard terms like funding winter and all of these things getting thrown around, and I don't think we have that in the Philippines, to be honest. I think the sun is still shining in the Philippines. This is our time to build great companies. So if you're thinking about it, you don't even have to quit your job yet, but start somewhere, right? Like if you have an idea, take nights and weekends to stress test the idea with friends. What I say is that the founder's job is not to convince an investor. That's much later in the journey. Your job is to build your team, right? You're the first people you have to convince that the idea you have is a interesting one are your fellow co-founders, if you bring on co-founders, or your first colleagues, employees who believe in you and your mission in the journey. Then you have to the collective group of you and your team and will have to convince customers that the solution you're building is worth them parting with their hard-earned money to have a sustainable set of revenue and profit for you as a business. So you have to then convince your customers and sell what you're building to customers next. Investors are the third step, right? I mean, and so
many jump to the third.
That's
step
right.
first,
So
right.
the biggest mistake I've seen is people wait until they get funding to start.
Right.
You're not an entrepreneur if you're doing that, right?
Yeah.
You should be already taking bringing people along. Even if you have a day job, you're working at nights and weekends on the side to develop the idea. Talking to people like us about your idea even before you decide to take the plunge. Ultimately, bootstrapping something, just selling something, starting small.
Right.
That's my advice. Is that each of us as business people, it's almost imperative for us to then think about, on top of whatever you might be doing on a day-to-day basis, is how can you, what's your role in making the pie bigger for the country, right? How can you help the country? What ways as a business person can you help the country prosper?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paulo.
Thank you, Simon. That was fun.
I think we reached the end. Thanks everyone for listening. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Simon.